So I will start this off by first of all saying that when I heard that I might have an opportunity to sit and simply have a conversation with Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, I said, definitely yes. Doesn't matter what we talk about. I'm happy to simply be able to sit with her. We could talk about the telephone book, and I'll be hanging on her every word. But I think we'll have more important things to talk about than the telephone books, because the issues are very important. The distinction between pleasure and happiness. So I'd like to begin with a question, and then we'll simply see how things roll. We have nothing choreographed, no agenda here, except to talk about meaningful things. And so, as a person who's been practicing for several decades, like Jetsunma, the question comes up when one is really very drawn to meditation. You Buddhist, you talk about attachment being a real problem, but aren't you getting attached to meditation? Isn't this just more of the problem, you know? Shouldn't you just be kind of loose? Meditate when you feel like it. When you don't feel like it, don't meditate. But don't be attached, you know? So here is the Venerable Nun who spent, 12 years in meditation retreat. That sounds like a lot of attachment to me. Like you were really attached to her cave, attached to being a nun, attached to meditation. Sounds like really a problem, yeah? So Jetsunma, please clarify for me, why is that not just a big problem?
Yes, so of course one of the problems is our language. That although on one level English is an extraordinarily rich language, so vast. I mean, the dictionaries are this big, or they get several volumes. Yet on some really crucial terms, the language turns out to be very impoverished. We were discussing the word desire. You know, desire for ice cream, the desire for enlightenment. Same word. The word for love. Love for ice cream, love for the guru, love for the practice. And the same is true for the word attachment. In Tibetan, it's very specific. The word docha has the connotation of a grasping, clinging mind, which is inherently negative. That it is not, one doesn't feel, it's not the same word as the word for wishing for enlightenment, wishing to practice one's devotion to the Lama, and so forth. It's a very different word with a very different connotation in mind as one says the word. The word docha is one of the mental defilements and is never used together with the idea of desiring virtue or yearning for higher realizations and understandings. So, therefore, I think attachment is this grasping mind which holds on and identifies with in a way which, for meditation, for example, it's in order to learn how to let go. I mean, one of the main points of practicing and understanding the various levels of the mind is in order to arouse a sense of open spaciousness and release, freedom, which is the very opposite of grasping and clinging and holding on tightly.
This word grasping is very closely related to this word attachment, or the ducha. There's a very famous, very short aphorism in Tibetan. If grasping is occurring, you don't have the view. You're not viewing reality authentically. If there's attachment, then by the very definition of this in Tibetan, you've objectified something, you've reified it, which means you've kind of solidified it, and then you're seeing that thing, that object of the mind, as that's going to make me happy. That. as you're looking at it. It could be a person, an object, even something abstract like reputation or what people, all kinds of things. But as soon as you latch onto something, some object of the mind, you reify it as being something separate from yourself, and you say, that's going to make me happy. That's going to make me happy. That's attachment. So it's possible, and we've both seen this happen. People get ideas of what meditation is. If I meditate, you know what meditation is like. You go into a meditative state, right? And you experience bliss all the time. That's the idea. I want to meditate because I want to have a meditative state. And I'm just going to be sitting there like, oh, oh, it's so nice. I want to meditate. And we have this crystallized notion of that's what meditation is like. So could attachment arise to that?
Definitely.
Yeah. But that's not meditation, right? That's some kind of silly concept. And so when I'm reading the media, I'm really quite amazed. In the popular media, all over global media, even scientific media, we've talked about the impoverishment of the English, you mentioned the impoverishment of this immensely rich English language. But when it comes to these things, it is so superficial. And look at the popular media. The word meditation is being used often equivalent to mindfulness. If you're practicing mindfulness, mindfulness, mindful meditation, yeah, basically the essence of all meditation is being mindful. And then I've seen this many times. And when you enter the meditative state, as if with your meditation, if you meditate, it's all going to one thing called the meditative state. It's very naive. It's very naive. We come up with some crystallized abstract notion, reify it, and then simplify the richness of meditation throughout multiple schools of Buddhism, and then let alone Hinduism, Taoism, and so forth. So as we mature, as we ripen this interface between this ancient wisdom heritage or tradition of Buddhism and bringing this into the modern world, we know that when it comes to science, the terminology is incredibly sophisticated, detailed, precise, and so forth. And I think what is not really clear yet to scientists who are studying meditation, let alone to journalists at large, is Buddhism is about 6 times as old as science, and that's 6 times the period of engaging in rational, precise, meticulous, empirical inquiry. So to simply to view Buddhism as a religion is missing, not that it's not religious. Being a nun, devotions, rituals, and so forth play a very important part in Buddhism. But to simply say Buddhism is a religion is missing maybe, 80%? Something like that. Because it doesn't fit into these categories of the West. Buddhism is really, it is above all, a mode of knowing. It's all about knowing because the root of suffering, the fundamental root of suffering is not knowing and getting things wrong. And therefore, the only antidote that's going to work is carefully investigating with your full intelligence, your full clarity of vision, to probe in the nature of reality, because that's the only way you'll overcome ignorance. Not simply by believing, being obedient, and so forth, but it really is a whole tradition of knowing. So I'm looking forward to the day when the sophistication of Buddhism is meeting not simply with scientists studying Buddhist meditators. Oh, can I study your brain? I've heard you meditated a lot. What can I do? Study your brain? Would you like to answer this questionnaire? Like they're experts here, and they're all the scientists and the meditators who may have meditated for 40,000 hours over a period of 10, 20, 30 years. They're treated like, 2-legged guinea pigs. So I think we can move beyond that now to see that maybe there's some parity. It might be an idea, we could try it. I'll just tell one anecdote. In 1992, 22 years ago, I was with a group of world-class scientists. There's Francisco Varela, you must have known him, and Richard Davidson, renowned, Cliff Saran ran the whole Shamatha project, and then Greg Simpson. These were really outstanding. And with His Holiness's blessing, we took about backpacks full of equipment, and I was the liaison because I had been meditating with these monks up above Dharamsala years before, and so they knew me. And so I was primarily kind of the cultural liaison and the interpreter for all these scientists. And they wanted to study compassion and attention. The scientists did. Compassion and attention. Yeah. So we hiked up an hour and a half up the hill, carrying these big, heavy backpacks of computers and consoles and EEG equipment and all kinds of stuff. Very high tech. And we came to one yogi who'd been up there for about 20 years or so. And so we all traipsed in. He knew we were coming. And we knew that it was with the blessing with the Dalai Lama that we're not invading their space. So everything was kosher. And so these scientists then, they asked, and I'm their interpreter, they told this yogi, seasoned yogi, said, well, we scientists, we'd really like to understand the nature of compassion and attention. And so would you allow us to hook your brain up with our EEG? We'd like to do some measurements on you so we can understand compassion and attention. And the yogi looked with a kind of an expression like Tenzin Palmo's like that. The word that comes to my mind is bemused. Kind of like, maybe like this. You'd like to understand compassion and attention? I'd be happy to help you. I'll teach you how to meditate. That wasn't actually what they wanted. They wanted to study it as scientists, But they're just like learning mathematics. If you really like to learn mathematics, you know what you don't do? Study the brain of a mathematician. You actually study mathematics. You do mathematics, and then you learn about mathematics. Meditation is kind of similar, I think.
How are they getting on with all that?
The meditators or the scientists?
The scientists. We know how the meditators are getting on.
Well, let's come right back to the central theme for this little conversation here, this wonderful conversation, and that is pleasure and happiness, as in eudaimonia, as in well-being, something really stemming from a deeper source. What His Holiness Dalai Lama was talking about when he said the pursuit of happiness is the meaning of life, as opposed to pleasure, which Einstein said is the ambition of a pig. So it's a pretty clear distinction there. What I found is, you and I both know so well that meditation really, the word means cultivation, of course, from the Sanskrit, that it's all about cultivating our hearts, our minds, our whole way of living our lives and viewing reality and engaging with others, the natural environment, all sentient beings. It's a massive cultivation of a way of authentic living and authentic viewing of reality and bringing forth the most wholesome and realistic momenta or momentums in the mind. But it's really all about the cultivation and realization of genuine happiness, all the way up to Buddhahood itself, which for the Buddhists would say that's the pinnacle, that's the culmination of the pursuit and realization of genuine happiness. That's what it's really all about. And if we look at the scientific papers, and there are now scores of them, hundreds of them, studies of meditation, especially mindfulness, but other types of meditation as well, what I found is in the vast majority of them, they are studying meditation for its hedonic value.
Yeah.
What is it good? Is it good for stress reduction? Is it good to help you make more money? Is it good for other health factors? Will it help you sleep better? And so forth. And having translated for His Holiness on many occasions in this regard, if some types of Buddhist meditation can be helpful for people's health, for their affluence, for their interpersonal relationships, overcoming stress and so forth, His Holiness said, well, the whole point of Buddhism is to alleviate suffering. That's it, kind of like in a one-liner. The point of Buddha Dharma, the teaching and practice, is to alleviate suffering. And so if those are the questions people are asking, I'm really stressed out in my work. Can you teach me meditation to help? I can't sleep very well. I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. Can you help me with that? I'd like to have a better romantic life because I keep on turning off all my would-be girlfriends. Can you help me out? Meditate, could that help? None of these are trivial for the people who are asking the questions. There's nothing to ridicule here. And His Holiness' comment here was, look, if you can alleviate suffering with Buddhist meditation, that's very good. If it can be very helpful for alleviating stress in a completely decontextualized way, just plucked out meditative practices out of the whole context of ethics, out of the whole context of the broader cultivation of the mind, out of the context of really recognizing our false assumptions, preconceptions, and really probing into the nature of reality and getting to the root of delusion and ignorance. If you want to pluck it out of all that context, you can, and if you can help people and their suffering is alleviated, they find a bit more pleasure, a bit smoother ride in life, he said that's a good thing. But then he added, don't mistake that for Dharma, for Buddha Dharma. Because Buddha Dharma is fundamentally, it's about liberation. It's about awakening. And of course, one's pleasure in life does increase. The pleasure of a conversation, the pleasure of just the beauties of nature, the pleasures of watching children at play, the pleasures of so many things, enjoying the beauty of the day. You and I were commenting, what a lovely day it is outside. Here it is dark, cold, and chilly. And outside, why are we in here again? But whether you're a nun or whether you're a layperson like myself, if you're practicing meditation a lot, in fact, your enjoyment, your pleasure in these simple pleasures of life that rise up from moment to moment can be enhanced. But that's not the primary reason to meditate. It's for genuine well-being that comes from insight. So that point, that was kind of an elaborate response to a very meaningful question. I don't see that being addressed much. And I don't know, well, there's hardly a study I know where the scientists are approaching the contemplatives, especially if they've spent years, decades in practice. I hardly know of a study. I think I know of one where they're coming with a sense, what can we learn from you? Not what can we learn about you, your brain states, your behavior, and so forth and so on. But you people, you Buddhists, Taoists, Hindus, Christian contemplatives, you've been doing this, frankly, a lot longer than we've been doing what we're doing. The cognitive sciences are about 135 years old. So you've been doing, might we learn from you? What have you discovered once you've spent 10, 20, 30,000 hours in meditation, probing the nature of the mind, seeking the true roots of suffering, the roots of genuine happiness? Share with us your insights, because you may have come upon some insights, some discoveries that have been replicated thousands, tens of thousands of times, which we scientists, always looking outwards to the objective world, we've not discovered yet. I haven't seen that happen. It's by and large, we scientists, we have our act together. Now tell us, let us hook you up. So hopefully here, we'll see more of a parity coming up in the near future, where there's a bit of kind of like respect where respect is due, if I can say so.
But maybe sometimes when people approach meditation with these rather, limited expectations, because they have limited expectations and are not doing it in order to become enlightened, they might actually experience something which they were not expecting at all. I mean, one of the problems of people meditating is that they have expectations. And it's a matter of, what will I get from this? And that acts as a great block to really advancing. And so if you go with a very open mind, just hoping it's going to lower your blood pressure or what, and de-stress you a bit, then it could happen, I think, that actually, because the mind is more relaxed and not expecting anything much, that something might actually happen, which will then arouse a real interest in the nature of the mind. What is this all about, actually?
That certainly does happen. I think you must have witnessed this many times, and I've been engaging in collaborative research with scientists since 1992. That's when it began. And knowing more secularized programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I know the founder of that, John Kabat-Zinn. He's a wonderful man. Very good heart, intelligent, really altruistic motivation. I have a lot of affection for him and respect. Because by skillful means, he has plucked some methods outside of the whole context of Buddhism, brought them into a clinical setting, and alleviated, who knows, it has to be tens of thousands of people, alleviated suffering for so many people. And so it's a good thing. Now, is that the essence of all Buddhist meditation? No, it's not. Is meditation and mindfulness, are they the same? No, they're not. But it's a way to start. And then as people start, because this has been up for 30 years now or so, then just as you were saying, people do a bit of this, they do 20 minutes, and then the questions start to change. Maybe you're coming in because too much stress, or you have a pain here, or arthritis there, or what have you. But as you go deeper and you start getting the taste of it, a little bit of an inkling, a fragrance of something coming from a deeper space, a sense of well-being, a sense of serenity, a sense of ease, which is just the opposite of grasping. Then the first question may have been, I'm physically kind of a mess, can you help me out? Stress-related disorders all over the place. And that's not a bad, it's dukkha, so why not? Dukkha means suffering. But then as they go deeper, then deeper questions may arise, and deeper questions may arise. And so that does happen. And so I think it's skillful means. Almost like if you take a person who is afraid of the water into a swimming pool, you come in the shallow end. You don't throw them in deep end. You take them to shallow end. And as they start to see that it's not dangerous, that it's actually quite pleasant, then you can take them step by step, and actually maybe they'll learn how to swim. So, how would you understand the relationship between meditation and happiness? The relationship between meditation and happiness.
Well, if we're talking about genuine happiness, then that comes, undoubtedly, that really comes from the mind. Because one can be in the most outwardly challenging external situation and yet inwardly have a sense of genuine joy, as well as being in a very pleasant situation and feeling utterly miserable. So it's clear that genuine happiness does not really depend that much on external circumstances. And so, I mean, as we all know, Buddhism has always recognized that the reason why we suffer inwardly really is because of our mental afflictions. And so meditation can help us to see these afflictions in the first place and recognize them and accept them, and then learn how either to deal with them by recognizing that they are not something solid, not something real, not something self-existent, or just by learning how to apply an antidote, how to transform them. But anyway, as the meditation obviously deepens, then the mental afflictions, the emotional afflictions, our greed and our anger, our irritation, and our envy, and our resentments, and our fears and worries, and all these emotions which agitate our mind, and which often we project outward to other people or external circumstances, then they begin to gradually not only become more clear, but also to become more settled and eventually be replaced by much more positive feelings. And as that happens, then naturally the mind becomes more settled, more spacious, more free, and one begins to become far more in charge of what's going on inside, instead of being the slave to whatever emotions happen to come up, like a push button, you know, like you push a button and you get tea or you get coffee or whatever, you know, you push an emotion and up it comes. And suddenly one recognizes one doesn't have to respond that way, that one has a choice how one is going to respond, and that one can respond skillfully as well as unskillfully. And then gradually that gives a sense of inner space, inner freedom. And now Alan is going to explain it all.
Well, as you were speaking, what came to mind was one of the central marks of existence in just foundational Buddhism, which is to say, it's true for all schools of Buddhism. The Tibetans simply run Zakche Tamche Dungal Wa, and that is Zakche Tamche Dungal Wa. Every experience we have, every experience of anything that we have, if it's tainted, if it's contaminated, filtered, conditioned by our mental afflictions, such as a strong sense of ego, I am, I'm really here, which means that now Tenzin Palmo is really over there, so this dualistic grasping, this strong bifurcation, reified, absolute bifurcation of subject, object, my side, your side, us and them, that's one of the big ones. And then the craving, the attachment, looking at some object, thinking that's going to make me happy, but also, and you are alluding to this, when we get unhappy, out comes the finger. Why am I unhappy? I think it's you. No, it's that place. No, it's Sydney. No, I think it's Melbourne. No, I think it's Australia. I need to get out of Australia. It really makes me unhappy. You know, finding something out there and thinking that's what makes me unhappy. That's a mental affliction. Pointing to some object and say, that's the source of my unhappiness. So as long as our experience is conditioned by this delusional notion of I am absolutely over here, independent, autonomous, separate from everybody else, and that out of that springs the craving, oh, that makes me happy, that makes me unhappy. Every experience we ever have that's conditioned by such mental afflictions, the Buddha said, and this has been echoed for the last 2,500 years, that experience is going to be dungal wa, unsatisfying. But we keep getting our hopes up. You know, when people get into romantic relationships, oh, I've been looking, I finally found the one who's going to really make me happy. Will you be with me forever? My love is forever, as long as you keep on delivering the goods. Keep on making me happy every time. You will live up to my expectations, won't you? Because like, you're supposed to make me happy. Or the car, or the job, or the new location, or the status, or the whatever it is. This just gives rise to an endless stream of dissatisfaction, and then we get a new girlfriend, boyfriend, new job, new this, new that. We get an extreme makeover. I don't like the way I look. By the way, I look old. I don't like looking old. So what can we do about that? I mean, I think really I got to get this dyed, right? I mean, it's so passé. And do you see all the wrinkles and the bags here? You know what's going to make me feel a lot better about myself? An extreme makeover. So I'll look into the mirror and say, now I feel much better about myself. Except for every time we do that, it winds up being unsatisfying. And when we don't learn, we keep on just doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, and never figuring out that it's not out there. That's not what makes me happy, and that's not what makes me unhappy. They may or may not, but all they do is catalyze. And when we start recognizing, aha, this dissatisfaction is not that person, this place, or that place. The dissatisfaction is the quality of mind I'm bringing to everything. And when we recognize that, then we say, aha, this is the primary thing to do. Transform, purify, understand, liberate your own mind, and then wherever you go, then you're bringing your genuine happiness with you rather than hoping to find it there when you arrive. It's fundamentally different orientation to the pursuit of happiness or well-being, as opposed to being like a dog running around in a garbage dump, you know, looking for pleasure. Like that. It's kind of sad.
When will we ever learn? This is the question.
Yeah.
I mean, this, you know, as you were saying yesterday, after so many, basically centuries, millennium, you know, this is the only thing which makes me doubt rebirth, is you'd think that by now we would have got it, you know, and...
There's an answer to that, though. Amnesia. I mean, a few kids, there's been very good studies of this at the University of Virginia, Ian Stevens, check it out. There are scientific studies, and they're really quite rigorous, of the occasional kid here or there, not in Tibet, but all over the globe, who start talking about their past lives, and lo and behold, throughout 95% of the cases, it's just kids chattering. But then that anomalous one, where the child actually is giving veridical, accurate accounts of a previous life, and they have no access to that knowledge. That does raise questions. But most of us are not that way. Most of us are not talking about our past lives. We're basically talking about, where's my baseball? You know, or just whatever in this lifetime. So, but I see a strong analogy here. That is, every time we do this, we get re-embodied. It's kind of like a veil of amnesia comes down. You know, we get so fixated, so caught up in the affairs of here and now that, you know, we forget back then. But a good analogy is a little microcosm, whether or not you believe in reincarnation. But you do believe in dreaming, right? And so consider this. You fall asleep. Roughly 90 minutes later, you enter into a dream cycle. You have 5 to 7 a night, according to the scientists. 90 minutes after you fall asleep, you enter in your first dream cycle. In your first dream, do you remember where you were 90 minutes ago? Not usually. Then you fall asleep, 90 minutes later, you have another dream cycle. But when you're in your second dream, you probably don't remember who you were in the first dream. And then you have your third dream, you didn't remember either of the previous dreams. You may go through 5 to 7 dreams, and finally, it's brrr, comes the alarm at 7 o'clock the next morning. You wake up, you say, how are you doing? Did you dream? No, I don't think so. You can't even remember that you dreamed. You just went through 7 rebirths. And you can't even remember that you were reborn, and you had the last one only 10 minutes ago. So I think amnesia characterizes samsara on the big level, and on the little microcosm of a 24-hour period, it's just amnesia all over the place.
Yeah. So we're stuck.
You know there's an antidote to that? You ready? It's a really cool term. You might have heard of it. It's called mindfulness. And the word mindfulness, if we go back to the classic literature of all schools of Buddhism, I've checked this out. The word mindfulness, from the Pali, the Sanskrit, the Tibetan, Mongolian, Japanese, and Chinese, those are the ones I've checked out. The word mindfulness has, in all of these languages that have become Buddhist languages, or have embraced Buddhism, the word mindfulness has a primary connotation of recollection, to remember, to not forget, to not be distracted. So we learn something. We learn something individually, but how about culturally? You know, I believe the ancient Greeks, like people like Socrates, Pythagoras, Plato, and so forth, they had such insights, incredible insights, that early desert fathers out in North Africa, these Christian monks, I've read them. They're pretty awesome. The monks on Mount Athos in the 13th century in Greece, I've read some of their practices and insights. Awesome. And what? We forgot them. Our own heritage. The Jewish heritage, the Muslim, the Abrahamic religions, there's so much wisdom there. But we get so caught up in modernity that we forget what was known 500, 1,000, 1,500 years ago. So what I think we need here is mindfulness of the richness of our own cultural heritage. The Jewish, the Christian, the Greek, the Roman, the richness of all of this. And don't just be a reductionist and say, well, if it was published 5 years ago, it's probably passé. What are the scientists saying today? So mindfulness means bearing in mind, not forgetting the insights we've had in the past, and not assuming that only scientists have the insights. They have a lot of the insights, but you know where their insights are: the objective, the physical, and the quantifiable. That's what they're good at. But contemplatives, for example, primary insights, nature of the mind. Nature of the mind. And so not forgetting these insights and bringing these together. So our time is out, but I think here on this point, I'm here not to divide, to set up religion. I'm so utterly bored with science versus religion and so forth. I mean, I just yawn. I fall asleep when I hear that going on. But the challenges we're facing in the modern world, they're so pressing, they're so deep, they're so important. It's a time for unification, for the wise people of the great religions of the world to join with the wise people of science and coming together, because we have so much to share in a complementary fashion. That notion of competition, I'm right, you're wrong, I think we have to be outgrowing that very quickly. Thank you for spending time with me.
Thank you.
By the time we're 60, more than 90% of us will have known someone close to us who has suffered from some sort of a neurological disorder.
You all know you're not going to live forever. There's only one way into this life and one way out.
I cannot prove to you anymore that anything is possible.
Talk about the marvelous thing that we now understand about our brains.
It gets so much better.